So in this video, I'm going to be talking about it's a little bit of a history lesson, but talking about audiences, okay? Now, why are audiences so important when it comes to advertising? Well, number one, it's gonna basically waste less money. You're gonna make sure that more of your money goes to the right places, and it's gonna be more efficient for you. Also, on the part of the advertising system, it makes their ecosystem more healthy if more relevant ads are being placed in front of their users. So there's a cost feature, there's an efficiency feature, and there's also the ecosystem feature, which is, or the aspect, which is very important to also consider, because they really want advertisers long-term that are going to be posting relevant ads to their marketplace. Okay, so let's go through the history, and then I'm gonna break down basically what an audience is, so that you'll be able to understand it, and your ad dollars are going to they're gonna go a lot further, and it's gonna be a lot more effective, and it's gonna create lots more leads. In my case, if you're in my industry, which is in recruitment, it's gonna help you recruit a lot more folks. Okay, so I'm gonna go into those different scenarios. Okay, so in order to understand the importance of audiences, I think it's important to explain how the technology over time has really advanced to the point that we've gotten to this point of audiences, and it's so much better. Basically, the way audiences work, before I go into the history lessons, is that it's going to allow you to target certain types of individuals that you're looking for, whether it be for a new customer for your product or service, or a new team member as a recruit. I'm going to be talking more from the aspect of a recruiter, but this can easily be applied to really most any other business. The difference is that with a lot of businesses, you may have a much wider audience than I would have as a recruiter. I'm going to be much more targeted than you are. So targeted audiences, it takes even much greater importance in my case than someone who's selling a product or a service that really can be used by anyone, right? So for instance, if I was selling, let's just use the example of a phone. If I'm selling mobile phones, I can virtually sell to pretty much any customer. I mean, anybody in the United States, for example, has a phone. Something like 95% of the population has a phone. So I can advertise to 95% of the population, and I don't have to have targeted audiences. I think there probably is still a reason why you would have it in that case, and that would be for a different video. But the point is that with recruiting, we typically are not advertising to 95% of the population. We're probably advertising to somewhere about 2 to 3% of the population, even if that. So let me go into some of the reasons why this is so much better than what we used to use in the past. Now, what we used to use in the past, and it worked for a lot of years, worked really great, is we would search based on keyword. And a lot of us still use search engines in that way. That's still a relevant way to use a search engine. If you type in a certain keyword of what you're looking for. For instance, if I want to learn, let's say I want to change the oil on my vehicle. I want to know about where are all the dealerships in the area that basically sell that service of changing the oil, right? So I can type that into a search engine, oil changes, and I can put in my zip code, and I'm off to the races. I'm seeing all kinds of choices. The challenge with that, and the challenge in my business with recruiting, is that people type things in different ways. So you actually have to figure out what that end user is going to type in to find you. And they may be using certain keywords that you're not even aware of to find your business. Now, there are some tools out there where you can find what the keywords are, but it can be an incredibly difficult and kind of an elusive process to figure out all the possible keywords. And that's still not the end of it. Not only do you have to account for the different keywords, but you also have to account for budgeting, because certain keywords are going to be more effective for you than others, and you're going to have other bidders who are also bidding for some of those same keywords. And it can get incredibly competitive. I was reading an article just the other day that just for any average search, we're not even talking about recruitment, which is going to be much more expensive, but just for recruitment alone, it's averaging between $50 to $100 just to get some type of buying action in terms of someone visiting your website or acting on the ad. when it comes to search space. So not only is it a challenge to try and have all the different search terms available, but then on top of that, trying to figure out the whole auction thing. Now, what also is difficult in recruiting is that most people, when they search in a search engine for a particular type of job, what comes up is not jobs. What comes up is job boards. In fact, don't take my word for it. Try it right now. Go on to your search engine if you would like. Type in what you would normally, type in for a job. Maybe it's like, let's say using in my industry, it might be registered nurse jobs. So if you typed in registered nurse jobs and then whatever your location is, what tends to come up? Well, in a lot of cases, you're going to see a lot of job boards come up. And the reason why you're going to see them come up is because they're basically buying up those keywords. So if you want to be on top of the listings for your particular area, you're going to have to be competing against most of the job boards with that. So a lot of facilities don't really do that anymore because it's not that effective. You might as well just go ahead and let happen what's already happened, which is the job boards are buying up all of that activity. They're trying to pull in those particular users to come to their site. And in the case of Indeed or Glassdoor or ZipRecruiter or even LinkedIn, which you're probably looking at this video right now, they're aggregators, right? So what they do is they pull all of the jobs into their site anyway. So they're already, if you're posting your jobs on an applicant tracking system, they're already pulling in your jobs. So you could bid against them. You could try and fight that battle. But I think what I'm about to share with you is you're actually going to find a much more effective way to be able to still garner those same candidates in a slightly different way using audiences. But just so you know, the search-based type of advertising is not what it used to be. Now, if you have certain products or services that you're selling, and you know what your client or your candidate acquisition cost is, and you can figure out a way to make that search-based marketing work where the dollar amount is below what you would receive in from a customer acquisition category, then maybe search-based is still working for you and will work for you, especially if it's a high converting type of product or service. I happen to be in one that's a very low converting. So in recruitment, roughly 99% of the jobs, in fact, I'll give you an example. I was talking with a rep from Indeed not long ago, and they say a long-standing number for them is about 1.5% response ratio. So when they see a job, there's only a 1.5% chance they're going to apply for that job. That means there's a 98.5% chance that they're not going to apply for the job. Now, that's a very low conversion rate, would you agree? So I don't want to spend a lot of money on search-based advertising because the conversion rate is just way too low. You're going to need a much higher conversion rate in order to justify paying $50 to $100 for a cost per acquisition on traffic. Okay, so have I already kind of got you off search-based? Okay, that's number one. All right, second one is display. Now this is a much better platform than the search-based because I'm not having to compete against the job boards anymore. Now I can actually have my particular job ads or whatever it is you're selling on particular job sites that I approve of, that I'm saying it's okay for it to be on. I'm basically renting space on that particular website. And I'm renting space saying, I want to put my information there when you have users come to your site. I want you to display my ad. So that's good. And it's actually much less expensive than search-based, much less expensive. The problem is that number one, how do you keep up with all the different sites that it should be on that's relevant to what you're doing? That's very difficult to do. I mean, there are some tools within the system where you can somewhat manage it, but it can become very difficult over time to try and manage that, okay? So to manage the relevance of that particular site to whatever it is you're selling. For instance, in my case, if it's a registered nurse job, and I want to make sure that my job is on, I don't know, let's say a site that sells scrubs, for example, or a site that sells stethoscopes. There's a high likelihood a lot of those people are not only in the healthcare industry, but they're also actually nurses. So in that case, it would behoove me to have my display ad on their particular website, and that's good. But we all know that nurses don't spend 100% of their time online looking for things that's relevant to what they do. Okay, they probably spend a very relatively short amount of time compared to other things, whether it's TikTok or Facebook or whatever else they're doing that have nothing to do with their job. So by doing it that way, you have a very limited scope. Therefore, the cost goes up. And even though your conversion rate may be somewhat better than, let's say, the search situation, it's less expensive, there's better technology out there now. So instead of just finding relevant websites, now what we can do is we look at the audience, the person, the individuals. What types of sites do those individuals go after? And so through time, the algorithm starts to figure out that these IP addresses, which represent people, most likely are nurses because they've visited nurse sites in the past, or in the case of a job audience, they've looked for a job in the past. In fact, they looked for a job just this past week, and they end up going to Indeed at that point, or they also click on a Glassdoor ad. So we know these people probably are looking for jobs, so they're going to be in our audience. So I'm kind of oversimplifying it, but I'm just trying to help you figure out how these audiences are created. So it's based on behavior on the internet over time. Now, as the algorithm starts to learn more about your ad campaign and learn more about whoever your target audience is, it starts to be able to match those up more effectively. So that's where the display ads using an audience base is much more effective than trying to pick certain particular websites. By the way, all this other stuff I'm telling you that doesn't work anymore, those are things that, the reason why I know they don't work anymore is because I've actually tried them and they stopped working. Okay, they worked at one time and then they stopped working. So that's what I'm sharing with you, so you don't have to do the same thing. Now, where does video come into play? Imagine using the same idea with display ads, but now we're inserting a video instead of a display ad. It is so much more powerful. In fact, we're finding if someone watches 30 seconds or longer, or more than 50% of your video, they are in some cases 3, 4, sometimes even 10 times more likely to click on that particular ad to go check out your website. I mean, it's amazing results. And it kind of makes sense, because think about this. When you were searching to find whatever let's say you weren't even searching. Let's say you were scrolling through your feed and you found this video. Okay, so think about the last, 5 pictures you saw without looking. Can you recall the last 5 pictures you saw? Probably not. Most of us can't, because we're inundated with so much information, and pictures have an effect. Unless you're emotionally connected with a particular picture, you're probably not going to remember it. Now let's think about video for a second. What about the last video you saw? Can you remember what that last video or two that you saw? There's a good likelihood you may remember the last video or two you saw. Why is that? Because it's actually interacting with more than one sense, and also in a lot of cases video can connect with us better emotionally. And so when we're looking for a job or a service or a product, we tend to connect with people if we're actually able to see them, moving, talking people, versus just a stagnant picture. And by the way, one mistake I've seen one mistake I've seen quite a bit, or quite often, is that organizations use a lot of stock footage. So if I've looked at 5 ads over the past, day, and they're all using stock footage, and a lot of these organizations are getting stock footage from the same websites, they may actually in some cases be using the same pictures. How am I, the job seeker, the user, able to differentiate one ad from the other? It basically makes the picture useless, because if it's a stock footage, it's very hard to show differentiation, number one. And number two, you're not connecting with me on an emotional level, because I know these people are not people that work at your hospital. So if you're using stock footage in your ads, I would say stop doing that right now, and definitely move to actual people who work at your organization so you can connect better. Otherwise, there's not really a whole lot of use in using pictures. And same thing goes for your video. The absolute worst videos I've seen are the ones that are like slideshows. Basically, it's just like a bunch of pictures that they have on this slideshow, and people just don't connect with that. They want to have interactions and relationships and build trust with people. And so unless you have actual people in your video, moving, talking people, not just narrators, I mean people who are actually talking on camera, it's going to be very difficult for you to connect with your audience emotionally. So please don't tell me, hey Ross, we used videos and it didn't work, because it does matter what you have in the video. And I know we spend a lot of time on what type of content we put in the videos. But you can see how using the audience-based could connect more readily with my audience if I am using that technology that has already figured out that that's more than likely the nurse that I'm looking for, in terms of them being a registered nurse. And I am presenting them with relevant content that's relevant to them, even though they weren't even on a nurse-related website. They could have been waiting to watch, I don't know, the latest Katy Perry video or something like that, or maybe they're about to watch Beyonce, and all of a sudden my video comes up of whoever client I'm working with at the time comes up, and they see that video, and you know what? They're interested because they actually were looking for a job. They actually are in a job search, and they were looking at one recently, maybe on Indeed, and the ad platform was able to see that, and they served up that ad because they know that person who's waiting to watch that video is a nurse. So that's where the display comes into play, is that we're playing these videos on pretty much any kind of website that within reason. I mean, we're not going to have it on some type of I don't know. In fact, the ad platforms don't even allow pornographic sites. So there's going to be sites that you're not going to want to associate your brand with, that it's just not going to play them on those sites. So it is going to be somewhat selective, and you can actually select the type of content that you're okay with those ads being on. But anyway, it's going to be relevant to the user because they're in the audience, and it doesn't matter that they weren't on a nurse or a medical related site or whatever it is that you're selling. So hopefully that helps you to get a little bit better idea on audiences. And audiences, some of the advantage of audiences is that I no longer have to compete with the job boards to get after a certain type of candidates, so which is amazing, okay? So now my price is definitely more reasonable, which allows me to take those same dollars and reach more of an audience, more nurses, and connect with them more readily. And then also I'm actually contributing to the ecosystem because my content is relevant to my audience. So my audience is actually going to appreciate the ads. It's not that people don't want to see ads ever, because they know that we have to have ads for a lot of these platforms to function. I mean, if there is no ads, there's no functioning Facebook, there's no functioning LinkedIn, right? There has to be some type of revenue generation. So people get that, but they also want those ads to be relevant to them. So in order to create a good user experience, it's definitely advisable to use the audience-based type of interaction, audience-based type of advertising versus the older keyword search. And even in the case of display, it's actually much more effective than display. Even though display is relevant and can be relevant, it's not as effective as video. So we essentially use video within that display advertising ecosystem, and it's working out great. If you have any questions, feel free and put something in the comments, or you can direct message me. Love to talk about it with you. Hopefully that clears up what you're thinking about audiences. All right, thanks. Appreciate your time.